Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Ruck with me, John Ferguson. And today I am being joined by one of our favorite South Africans globally because we are going to be talking all things TRC, specifically the Springbok leg of the start of the series with the Wallabies and against them. It is going to be an epic rivalry reignited, and to bring it in and to break it all down, which is what we do here at Off the Ruck, I'm bringing in the scribe at theraw.com, where we both used to write together for here in Australia, the Australian audiences, and then the man who covers two podcasts globally. So one, the Lekker podcast, which is all Springbok, if that is a decent attempt at a South African accent, and South African rugby, as well as the 8-9 combo, which has a bit of Australian leniency because Harry Jones has previously mentioned that he is a big fan of Australia, like almost second home-ish, as well as also being all things global rugby, which is what they cover there. Harry Jones, thank you very much for coming along and chatting rugby with me.
Yeah, how's it, John? Looking good. We should have had a beard off, but I actually trimmed mine recently, and you're still rocking the nice caveman look. So we could have had a nice contest. No, it's really good to see you, and I wanted to say this. We said this off air, but you're doing a really good job of bringing some nice, proper analysis to the subject, not just vibe, not just up and down, not just the emotions, not just the hottest take. I think it's good. It's good to dig in and see what works, what doesn't work for Australia.
No, and I said this as much off air. I appreciate you paying me the compliment. And sometimes when you're feeling like something needs to be done, you look around and you're like, well, I'll give it a crack myself before I have to pass judgment on anyone else. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm giving it a crack. I brought you in because obviously TRC starts. You're a proud South African, but also because I think with the Australian audience that I have, and there's less deep understanding and knowledge of what's actually going on over there, and that's what I want to bring into this episode, and that's why I recruited you for your expertise. Obviously, the Springboks out South Africa, and so we're heading into a two-game leg. The Wallabies are heading into a two-game leg against the Springboks starting this weekend. It's going to be absolutely mega for the Wallabies because every game counts right now for World Cup ranking, which happens at the end of the year. So, even though we may not be big favorites or anything like that of the sort, it still nevertheless is a very important moment for Australian rugby. So I wanted to bring you in to tell us a little bit about this Springbok squad. What are we seeing? Is it just the same copy and paste from seasons gone by, like the World Cup winning squad? Or are we seeing a few changes made here by Rassie Erasmus?
Yeah, it's really interesting how Rassie and his coaching staff. And we should point out it's Felix Jones, it's Tony Brown, it's Jerry Flannery, Coach Stick, Don Human, the scrum coach. It's one of the largest coaching staffs, but also harmonious, diverse, and they all have a voice at it. But it seems to be that they divide. They actually do message a year. 2024 was exceptionally experimental in terms of how many players were used. And that sort of carried over into the Italy and Georgia matches, where it was still a wide net, and you saw people like Vincent Chatuka playing blindside, even captaining for a while. So yeah, I think it starts now. 2025 Rugby Championship starts now for three reasons. One, the Boks want to defend the title. You bring up the rankings. That's important for Australia. It's also important for South Africa to stay number one. And that's one of the stated causes, is to do experimentation and blooding, but still stay at top. Be like New Zealand was for years, where they just owned that spot, and it's getting to be that way now for Springboks in this cycle. And then, they want to be at least 5-1, 5 wins, 1 loss. They want to win they want to think, and they win the thing. It's 2 games in New Zealand this time around, so you'd think that you really have to defend your home patch. This rivalry in particular has been that way. Australia does have the advantage in Australia. It's narrow, but for the Boks, they're proud of the fact that you guys have won, I think, only 20% of matches in South Africa, only 18% in New Zealand. So 18%, 20%, that feels like it could even crunch, and so, we want to say that you lose as much in South Africa as you lose in New Zealand. That would be, a nice thing to be able to say. But it's a hot rivalry, because when Springboks go to play in Australia, it's none too easy. And so that's the first thing. Second thing about how the Boks will select for this 2-game series. So Rassie and his coaches want to be the most difficult team to predict. They do it a
Yep.
funny way by naming their team on a Monday or a Tuesday. But I mean, I'm talking about where if you were talking a week beforehand, you would not know. So difficult to predict in that. Number two, don't be complacent. You know, you're the chased, you're the hunted, you're the one where if you beat the box, you get that's you made your year. So they want to make that kind of fear factor of staying out ahead. And the final thing is to be five deep in every position. That sounds insane. But to do a depth chart in the Springboks now, you have to use a Venn diagram because except for tight head prop, four lock, 9 and 15, all the other positions overlap. So if you're going to be proper blindsider, you got to be a lock as well or an eight.
Yep.
Even our hookers and lucid props now are interchangeable. So that's the other thing is, playing Australia affords you a 1-2. And so either you're going to go really heavy knockout if it were the Rugby World Cup knockout final today. Who
Mm-hmm.
would you pick? That's going to be probably Ellis Park. That's probably going to be in every position. You'll see who it would be, except for 9, where Morne van
Mm-hmm.
den Berg, you saw him in Perth a year ago, probably gets the nod on his home patch, Ellis Park. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is at number 8, there's injuries and suspensions. So maybe Jean-Luc Dupré.
Yep.
But, there's intrigue behind all that because even if you see a team that's basically, Ox, Marks, Vilko, Eben, Lewitt, Peter
Mm-hmm.
Steftotoy, Daniel Kulisi, Jean-Luc, and then you have Pollard, Dilende, Creel, probably Curtly Aronsa, maybe Colby if his knee's okay, if not Edwill, and then Willemse. That's basically, you guys know those guys.
Yep.
It's the behind the scene where is Franco Mostert, who's been that glue guy on the bench, has he
Mm-hmm.
been substituted by Ruan Nortia?
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at maybe player 23, is it Sasha Feinberg Gonzulu? Is it Mani Lubbock? So
Yep.
there's little intrigues inside that to get to the 5 deep. Most positions are 4 deep. And some positions are not. Open side's not. Open side's a weak area for us, strong for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then I think probably also you could say at 12 and 13, guys like Ethan
Mm-hmm.
Hooker, Kanan Moody, these are people that Rassie and co want to get to 25, 30 caps before the next World Cup. And right now they're around 12, 15,
Mm-hmm.
12, 5.
Yeah, I think.
So that's the bottom line is they want to play different ways, but it's in Cape Town where I would think you'd see more experimental picks.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into a little bit of a Wallabies what if and kind of like planning out as if we were Joe Schmidt a little bit later in the podcast because I think just as you have outlined there that Razim has a bigger plan behind his selections, I think that's very much something that the Wallabies should be thinking of. And again, this is what you and I are going to poke holes in and talk about tactically because we do have to do a bit of revision before we can do preview about the Lions versus this 2-game series. So we're going to get into that, but I think that what you say right there is really important, especially for those who haven't been paying as close attention to South African rugby. So, yes, we know the Andre Pollards, we know the Damien Dialandes, we know the Peter Steph but it's the other players in and around which we are excited to see, but also what we don't know. And not knowing becomes quite a dangerous commodity, particularly if that somehow gets taken by scribes over here or analysts or TV personalities as a disrespectful thing, as an experimental thing. There is as you say, you're 4 or 5 deep in every position. That you guys are too strong for us to ever consider that to be any sort of possibility from you guys. And so slotting in these unknowns, that is where I think we're going to continue to see the growth and excitement build into this TRC because we want to see the big superstars play. And so you've flagged a possible change at lock, at a possible change at 9 with Vandenberg, I think you've called him. And then you've also on the wing potentially if Cheslin Colby is not doing well with his knee. What are if they're targeting the Ellis match? Who could we possibly see in the Cape Town match? We'll get into more of a specific preview for game 1 coming into this weekend. But what do you see there for the experimentation? Because we want to hear the names of these players because we don't know them here in Australia.
Yeah, so depending on how we'll start for like 15 and go down, depending on whether Damien Willemse, who is the actual first choice 15 fullback, not Willie Leroux and not Afalele Fase. Yeah, the man who called the famous scrum
The
mark.
scrum man.
And in Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu can also play 15. So you have a lot of options there. But
Mm,
let's say you go with Gaza, as we call him, Willemse, sort of all-court player, incredibly strong, hard to bring down, but also a 2-foot kicking player. And you have him in Ellis Park. And let's say you have Mani Lubbock on a hard, dry field, quick, to be the player 23, because it's probably 6'2".
mm,
Then you for sure give Sasha the start in Cape Town, home field, the darling, and put him there at 15 and sort of say, you've already got the first one under your belt, so let's go crazy. Let's score
mm.
7 tries. Let's go
Yep.
crazy. We're imagining the first would be a lot more of a grim, test match, heavyweight battle, Will Skelton, Rob Bellatine, all these guys. So that's the goal if it's optimum. However, let's say it was a really close one, then maybe you stick with the guys and give them redemption.
Mm,
Yeah, Tristan Colby might come good. If he doesn't, Edville van der Merwe has been a revelation. He's one of these Lekkerbacks, we call him, where you have the mysterious scrum powers, conveyed through their scrum caps, unnecessarily scrum capped, but they're just, repeat athletes, no lactic acid,
mm.
go, go, go. They
Yep.
bite in, they come in on the umbrella. They are the ones who sometimes shoot and they blitz or
Mm,
13, and sometimes they stunt off each other. Edville is a proper reader of the game. So you won't even, they'll look the same. Like literally,
mm.
Kurtley Arisa and Edville, the commentators from South Africa get them wrong because of the scrum cap makes them look too similar. So
Yep.
there's that. But then you could look at maybe in the midfield. So Damon Delende had that franchise with Jesse Creel. They were literally playing in the semifinal in 2015 against Sonny Bill Williams and Ma'a Nonu. So that's a franchise, right? But Ethan Hooker is a guy from Durban that people from Australia may not have seen that much of.
Mm.
Big guy, can play wing, can play 13, can play 12. They like him at 13. Problem is, there's even a bigger guy named Kanan Moody that you guys do know from
We do.
Sydney,
He's
that,
hurt
that
us. He's stung
catch that
us.
he made, right? And he has never lost as a buck. And he's
Mm,
only gotten bigger. He's not that old. He's 21, and he literally walking out the tunnel, you think he's a lock. So
mm,
both of those guys are the new breed of 13, where they want to get in the air, they want to get in passing lanes, and they want to be a nuisance. So that's
mm.
something to look for. Inside center, definitely Damien Delende is too valuable to just keep running into the ground. So if he has a
Yep.
good shift, Ellis Park, you think maybe Andre Esterhazen, who's still only got about 20 caps, might get a run. And then I think, at open side, this is the whole question, right? Is how
Mhm.
many of the old guard, Bongi and Banambi, Siya Kolisi, how many of them can really make it? And if they're not going to make it, so if you decide in your brain, Bongi, Vlileru, not going to make it, Mapimpi, you've got to
Like if
find these
you're
other,
talking about if they're not going to make it to the World Cup.
the World Cup.
Yeah.
Then do you really want to keep putting 5 more caps into Bongi and Banambi instead of, say, Marnus van der Merwe,
Hmm.
who is a really up and coming guy? Grobbelaar, you have Jan Hendrik Wessels is a guy that you guys haven't seen much of. He is unbelievable athlete at prop hooker. This
Mm.
is a really weird combination, but he's done cover tackle, scramble, so he looks a bit like a hooker, but he's proper big. So I think those are curveballs. And then primarily it's probably to say, what's my cover? So who is my backup hooker? Is it Marnus or is it Bongi Banambi? Bongi
Hmm.
and Banambi is increasingly looking like just one big scar tissue, right? He's just nothing's bending anymore. It looks,
He's
painful,
looking like Stephen Larkham circa 2007. It's a lot of tape. It's a lot of tape.
but he has so much IP, so
Yeah.
you're balancing.
Mm.
Those are probably your positions: hooker, open side, inside, and outside center. Those are the ones that are questioned.
So you've really well outlined who we may see. And I think the terrifying aspect of that is that you guys have such great depth. And we've heard the names. We just haven't seen enough game footage of them to know how potent that they are. So there is no mistake that there is a high level of respect and understanding that these players are high quality players without us actually having seen how much damage they can cause. For the Wallabies, we are at a bit of a frail point right now. When you think about the loss of Arnala Toa, Taniela Tupou coming over with a toe injury, Rob Valentini still nursing that. I believe it's still the calf injury that's plaguing him, as well as losing our first pick halfback Jake Gordon, who's also got hamstring injury rather. And then also we've lost Dave Parecki to immediate retirement and Matt Fesler with a calf injury. So we're not going over there in the shape that we would like to be, but that is rugby. So that's just kind of what it is. But now, with that in mind, we have to start thinking about how do we actually go about this 2-game series in South Africa? Because we have to treat them in isolation. And this is something that I wanted to talk to you about, and I wanted to get your take on it. But I think that Joe Schmidt has been thinking about things in a longer format. He's been forward planning, and also that has come to a potential detriment to some of the immediacy of where the Lions were at. And now I think he needs to take that and kind of into this 2-game series against South Africa and be like, realistically, where is our best chance of winning? We don't just have to try to win every game, because the wins are so important leading up into November when the World Cup rankings are decided and we get our pools sorted and all that kind of thing. So I think that, as you've outlined, Springboks are likely to go with a really strong side game one, make a statement, put 50 on us. And with that thinking, with Taniela Tupou potentially in doubt, with Rob Valentini potentially in doubt, and then we're still waiting on kind of other guys around the peripheries where he's deciding to go and how far he's going to push people. We think we only have Will Skelton for these 2 games in South Africa and not later. That's what we think at this current time. Joe Schmidt should use the Ellis Park game to get big minutes into guys like Nick Champion de Crepney, Tom Hooper, get at least 35 minutes out of Lukan Salakai-Loto off the bench with a 1-2 punch with Will Skelton, and should be able to use other peripheral players like Zane Nongor, Tom Robertson, and really get them to smash themselves into this Springboks and do the best that they can to see who to pick at number 2 at tight head prop for the game that they want to aim at, which is that second game in Cape Town. Now, I just want to first get your take on that kind of tactical thinking about treating this as a series and being realistic about, for Joe Schmidt, where he actually thinks he can get a win. Because if you don't have Valentini and you don't have Tupou, I think that it's going to be a really difficult uphill battle for the Wallabies to get any sort of ascendancy anywhere against this Springbok side at Ellis Park at altitude. And altitude has its own impact.
Yeah, for sure. And so a split would definitely be heaven for Joe Schmidt. Number 1 on the rankings, John O'Drennan in Sydney Morning Herald has written a great article talking about
Great piece.
How you stay 6th. And, one thing he's not even banking on is splitting these 2 tests. He's banking on maybe splitting the Bledisloe. But if you were to take a leap in Cape Town and knock off number 1 at home, the exponential effect of that in your rankings is beautiful. And it would start out the whole thing in a wonderful way. So I do think Joe has that mindset, number 1, of a split is great. There's no reason to dream in silly dreams and then you end up, sort of getting pummeled and there's nothing. So I do think there's some gamesmanship there, some calculation. If someone is on the verge of being fit, but hasn't really, maybe he does hold them back. I get that. On the other hand, there's a morale issue where you don't want to get your team smashed. That loss to Argentina a year ago, it really was difficult. And you want your team to trust you. And I think, there's some players like you listed, a guy like Tom Robertson will find it much more difficult in the scrums in Ellis Park than he did against the Lions, which sounds anathema, except that, I don't think that Andrew Porter is really at the top of the scrum game. And, and when by the time Ellis Genge came on, he was more of a carrier in the rain. So I do think there's the ultimate test of your scrum and with tight engagements, we'll call it the loose scrum almost, is at Ellis Park. It's no longer at Eden Park, it's at Ellis Park. There are other parts of the game where Eden Park will test you more, but that particular thing is going to be tough. And I do think a guy like Tom Hooper has grown into his body. He was almost a sacrificial lamb in 2023 at Loftus, but he's much bigger now. I mean, he's gained, 7, 8 kgs. He's really comfortable accelerating into contact. Lucan Salakaia-Loto, same. He's very good in contact. I'd bring my contact guys in.
Mm,
I'd bring my, just people who are comfortable with bastardry and
mm,
be okay with the howling of the moon crowd wanting
mm,
your blood. I mean, that's what it's going to be
mm,
like, right? And it's not even against Australia, by the way. It's like we want to. It's the flagship stadium. It's the first proper game of the season. Everyone's going to want to be there and have an occasion, and
mm.
want to beat you better than the Lions beat you. That's it,
Yep.
right? It's
Yep.
it's just basically saying, "Oh, Lions, you thought that was good? Watch this."
Yep.
So I think obviously a guy like James Slipper, seen it all, done it all,
Mm,
but I wonder about those legs and that body.
mm,
So I think Joe's got an unenviable position on, the smash and grab at Cape Town. I get it. But what do you do to set that up where you don't lose your team's sort of trust in you, morale,
yeah.
is the first thing. And the other thing is you do want to set up what I would call patterns for the season.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe is a very like repeatable guy.
Mm,
So I do think, one thing is that the Wallabies did best when they approached the Lions saying, no tomorrow, hell for leather, we're the underdogs. And so I think it's even more applicable here. The Boks best is better than the Wallabies best at this moment.
mm-hmm.
So if we're just going to go out there and I'll do my best and you do my best, that's not going to work.
Yep.
You've got to make or help South Africa underperform.
Mm,
So if Springboks going to be, focused on execution, Joe Schmidt's going to think of disruption. And there are
mm,
players in your squad that are better disruptors than there are executors
mm-hmm.
per se. And so
Yep.
I would have a disruption team. I would have,
Mm-hmm.
guys on the floor, maybe not the biggest forwards, but the Tizanos, the McWrights.
Mm,
I might have both of them on the floor at some point.
yep.
Um, in midfield, don't love the setup the way it is right now. So I just
Mm,
think there's, you know, you just have to know that South Africa's going to want to isolate Tom Wright and encourage him to
mm,
make bad choices. You're
mm,
going to South Africa's going to stop them all and try to roll a few.
mm,
The Boks are going to try to create two-sided rucks, attack to beat, the open siders, and then change
mm,
directions early and use kick space. Kick space is going to be huge.
yep.
So Wallabies don't want to be on the end of that. They want to disrupt all that.
Mm,
Big barge, ruck pressure, just try to hit people as often as possible and then run onto
mm,
the Springbok backs from the long edge. So I do think it's difficult because if Joe goes a certain way, they go on, get slaughtered, then
mm,
how does he pick them up and say, no, 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 it was all part of a plan? That's kind of
mm,
disrespectful to the guys he put on the pitch. So
mm,
I would imagine it's going to be a proper Wallabies framework and then
mm-hmm.
full of guys. Like you're saying, I mean, you're not saying be dirty, but you're just saying go on there and mix it up from
Mm,
the beginning.
yep. And I think that's that was a great segue, and leading to my next point, which I wanted to bring up, was that the kind of skullduggery, the kind of in your face, the kind of ruffian stuff that Skelton was doing to the Lions, that is not going to phase the Springboks, but that is the bare minimum of what you have to do to be able to say, hey, we've just come to Ellis Park and we are going to give it everything that we have against you. We're not going to take a step back. And I think that who you want to pick in that squad with Will Skelton to be able to do that is Nick Champion de Crepney. He's played in France. He's not a sort of person that's scared of confrontation, physical confrontation. He's a big lad. Tom Hooper, and you're picking Nick Frost because he's easily the tallest and the best lock that we have, apart from Will Skelton as a complete package. Although he's not as staunch in defense and attack as someone like Jeremy Williams is, unfortunately, not unfortunately, that's probably a bit harsh, but the reality is Williams just hasn't been where he's needed to be, and he's still a bit too short to be able to compete with the heights of the Springboks line out, and just a bit too inexperienced still. And then mixing that up with who you put in the front row, it was really interesting how you mentioned the legs of Slipper. I am actually more concerned about the form of Angus Bell at the moment. He was pretty quiet throughout the Lions series. And if you're not scrumming really well and you're not denting the line like you are usually, like he absolutely obliterated England last November at the end of year tour, you need to be picking someone who at least holds up their side of the scrum. And I'm not saying that James Slipper can do it against the Springboks, but I know that Angus Bell didn't do it against the Lions. And so it's more of a rock and a hard place. We have lots of loose head props coming through. We have Aiden Ross with us. We have lots of young ones like Tom Lambert. Maybe for those in South Africa haven't heard about him, but there is really promising signs at loose head prop to be coming through and to be able to play that position. Where I am concerned is tight head prop, as we've addressed. Without Taniela Tupou, we won't have any scrum ascendancy, and I can see us getting pinged at least 5 times. That's bare minimum. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately. It's not that I don't want it to happen. It just feels like the reality. And then at hooker, you're stuck with a predicament of picking a Billy Pollard who is active, roaming, fast, Cody Taylor esque kind of in the mold to be, or a Brandon Pangamosa, which is much bigger, much sturdier, and also someone who has more experience, but hasn't necessarily been in the best form for himself or neither at the line out. So there is a really big discussion that needs to be had around that. And in the back row, I want to get your take from a South African perspective and also what you saw throughout the Lions on Harry Wilson there at number 8. Because I have been far from convinced. And if Joe Schmidt isn't going to name him as captain, I still think that needs to be a fair game position about where you're picking players who are on form and who are not.
I mean, in some ways, South Africans, we've become used to the idea of Siya being picked in large part for his captaincy attributes. I mean, obviously, he's the number of caps he has. It wasn't because he's not a good player. He's an incredible tram carrier. He's very comfortable as a distributor out wide. But it's not always, not from cap 20 to cap 40 was he always picked as that operator. I think nowadays, yes. So Harry Wilson doesn't have that many caps. I mean, he's actually a 20-something cap guy. And so he's still coming into his captaincy. I feel like he has shown the most crucial ability of any captain, which is to help his team rise to an occasion, to play above themselves. He's not the best, practitioner player on the field or in the pack, I think. Fraser McRide, I think, would be higher in the world rankings of open side flanker than Harry Wilson would be at number 8. Same thing, obviously, for Will Skelton, other players. So he's not looking around and they're not looking and saying, you're our best player. But at this moment in time, he's the best captain. So I think Joe has shown allegiance when he was in Ireland. He stuck with some players that weren't necessarily the best of everything, but they had character like CJ Standard, where he's just like, this guy will carry into hell for me. Harry Wilson never takes he always offers himself and promotes himself as a carrier. I do think being sent back the way he was a couple of times by the Lions, especially on high lows, but also sometimes by a Ty Burns single-handedly, that will be attractive to us. And we'll want to really monster him quickly. Other one is Will Skelton being billed as the, most amazing, magnificent, soul-crushing. You know how that works with African guys. That's like Jonah Lomu, never scored against us. So everyone's going to be lining up. Even a guy like Kwagga Smith is like, if I can knock that fucker out, I will be a hero forever. So they'll take it as an extreme challenge that anyone's talking about someone bullying anybody. Like, you're not going to come into my backyard and bully me. And so you might even have a more aggressive test than the third test, which is hard to imagine. Because, I mean, Will Skelton was his all time. Like, he stands on James Ryan's foot that no one actually sees. So James Ryan's going crazy. And as he's trying to free his foot from it, Will just pulls his scrum cap down over his face like it's an ice hockey fight. Then, James Ryan's is sputtering. While he's doing that, he's got his hand over here on someone else. And, by the time James Ryan comes out of it, he's trying to stomp on Will, which could have been a card. And I thought, try that in Ellis Park. It's going to be different. Yeah.
No, 100% agree.
So I do think there's, you're right. I think the Wallabies need to do big barge at Ruck. I think they need to find a way to get Joey Suaalii to run from long edges, from a Ruck close to the touchline, and really get some like long edge runs over and around. Because quite frankly, I think the Wallabies are all expecting, and Joe Schmidt might be expecting the Springboks to try to break down the front door. I feel like it might be the other way around. I think the Springboks might come with all kinds of angles and entice them into you want to play this game? We're at home. We're fitter than you. We've got speed to burn. Max Jorgensen's not the quickest guy on our team. He's on your team, like that kind of stuff. So there's going to be a lot of mano a mano. But, I think Joe has got to find Joey
Mm,
on he's going to find him early in space, in
mm,
wide direct lines with the wrap around him.
mm,
Or I just feel like people are going to be lining up to smash Suaalii and smash Skelton, and they're going to take
mm.
great pride in that one moment if they can just knock him back.
So I think that you raise a really interesting point there, Harry, around, you've put targets on the back of the guys like Skelton, but also Suaalii. And I think that we'll move now into a bit more of a tactical take on the Wallabies, as well as what they could potentially do to disrupt the Springboks. And that kind of brings you to a selection question around Suaalii. So Suaalii is a phenomenal athlete, but I think that he's pretty well matched by someone like Jesse Creel. Now, if he's stuck in the 13 channel with Jesse, he's not going around Jesse, and he's definitely not going through him and over him. Probably a bit of a mismatch with Hugh Jones there. Gary Ringrose defensively definitely could have one-on-one Suaalii if he'd liked, if he played like that. But Jesse Creel, completely different kind of athlete in defense as well as attack. And so there's been a lot of speculation about putting Joseph-Aukuso Suaalii on the wing. And I think that from a perspective of learning the game, it's not a bad idea. But for me, I don't think necessarily at the way that they've been playing and that you want to drop him at Ellis Park into the wing. It's just not a good way to be for him. That's my take. I think that I want to see Suaalii and Ikitau play this game. And then if that doesn't go well, I'd put Suaalii in the 23 jersey for the Cape Town game and put Hunter Paisami in the centers with Len Ikitau, who already have almost 16 caps next to each other starting as a center pairing, as opposed to Joseph-Aukuso, Suaalii, and Len Ikitau, who have, I think it's about 4 or 5. So can I just get it from a South African perspective? If Suaalii was put on the wing, does that worry you to any extent?
I mean, I prefer him at 13. I think Suaalii at 13 against us makes our eyes wide open. And it's not just Creel himself. It's on stunts, Dialende himself. It's Willemse coming in through from 15. It's the interplay between the wings. Suaalii hasn't played enough rugby union matches at a high level to recognize when a Tony Brown system is crowding him, spacing him, fainting. And I also think that he can use his length and his aerials on the wing more reliably without having to also think about the ruck after that and what he's supposed to do. I think the tackles at wing are much more favorable for a guy who's still using the touchline as his friend as opposed to in space. I mean, Jesse Creel's going to obviously want to pick him out right off the bat and just run as hard as possible right into him and just see what that looks like. And then do something else. And then flip it to, a Colby or a Aronsa and see what that looks like. A much shorter guy, but with incredible movement. What is Suaalii? Does he get low enough? Does he get carded? Does he get in trouble there? And also kicks behind. So always, the Bucks are always going to want to go, a long edge and then find kick space behind it and just dribble it over there, pooch it over there. If it's Pollard, if it's Libok, they're just going to try to make it where Suaalii literally doesn't know where to stand. That's where Finn Russell had him the most. I think on those first 2 tests, that's when Finn Russell sort of had him swiveled around too much and he was thinking too much. And so that's the one thing. I think, for Joe, I think he could find Joseph-Aukuso Suaalii better if he had same side, pod, outback, and then find him, than trying to just go straight up starter play, Ruck 1, 10 to 12 to Joseph Suaalii. I don't think that happens very well. Usually on the second pass, you get blitzed by Creel or by Dialende. You don't get to do a nice, proper one. Maybe you get offload. But then I think you're losing the magic of Suaalii. I thought the Wallabies' best moments were to get to the trams with 3 good hands guys, and they try to find Max or Peach. And I think if instead of Peach, it was Suaalii, I like my chances better because he can keep the ball alive, stronger, better. He's quick. He's got really good, spatial relations. So yeah, I kind of think for now, for me, he is a wing. Maybe down the road, he's more of a 15 if he can, figure out all the kick permutations.
Yep.
But I don't see him as a proper 13 against the best teams. I
Yep.
think the French eat him alive there. I think, Farrell already figured out how to do that. He was sort of a open door there, and I just don't even. I think even Scotland takes him at 13 there.
Yeah, and we've got evidence of that from last year. That was the game where Australia were exposed the most attacking
Mm.
wise. The Scotland absolutely picked us apart. That was tough to watch. And I think that from the Wallabies perspective, it's been a bit of doom and gloom. It's been a bit of reality check for a lot of people coming off the win for the British and Irish Lions game 3 there for the Wallabies. It's been I think we've said a lot of things that are not necessarily going to go in their favor so far. What I will say is that is there any sort of validity that the Springboks have come into this playing lesser sides, and that potentially leaves them less awake to the level that they need to be at to truly put this Australian side away game 1, whereas the Wallabies have truly been fighting for their life for the last 3 games. I'm not saying that the Lions are better than the Springboks at all. It's more just like that was a very tough opposition for us comparatively compared to what Georgia and Italy was for the Springboks.
Yeah, it's always a conundrum. So in one sense, you could wonder if the Wallabies are being held together, by bandages, because that was some rough rugby there. On the other hand, it always kind of makes you better if you are facing the likes of Finn Russell, um, people like that. They're just Ty Burn. These are like, operators,
Yeah.
top level. So that should be true. On the other hand, it's at Ellis Park, and there's only been 10 Wallaby wins ever in South Africa, and it's been since the 60s that that happened at Ellis Park. They'd be rip roaring to go, and so there's going to be that energy. I don't think, in other words, it won't be like the third game energy in the monsoon. It would
Yeah.
be more like that first test, where they're just all fit and firing. And things like set pieces, quite frankly, the scrum, the line out, they're actually better, easier to practice sometimes if you just drill. And the Springboks will have, our scrum's going to be ridiculous. So it's going to be how it's called, obviously. The referee can sometimes bail a team out. I thought the Wallabies, were hard done by actually in the third test, but I thought they almost were not as hard done by in the first test as they could have. So it just depends
Yep.
on the day. But I always ask coaches what do they like the most. If I could give them 5 of anything, 5 scrum penalties, 5 kick regains, 5 line out steals, 5 line breaks, and most coaches take 5 scrum penalties because you get to enter the 22 for free. You walk there, you get to talk about your line out on the way. If it's 5, that means someone's getting carded, and also the morale is down. So I don't. So what I'm getting there is Springbok first front row scrumming against second front row is supposedly the hardest scrum battle in the world right now. So what is Tom
Where
Robertson
does that leave us?
showing
Yeah.
James Slipper? Yeah, like what's that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a way, I think that's a problem. But
Mm,
yeah, for sure, I think things like 75th minute, the Wallabies they're ready because they've been playing some very tough, that second test, that was just white knuckle time. So that's probably
yeah.
good for them.
Mm. I think so. From a Wallabies perspective, you spoke a lot about being on the ground and competing. Kind of trench warfare there, getting a Tizano and McWright in together to be able to truly disrupt the breakdown. Because the Wallabies attack when we have the ball extremely narrow. You could throw a blanket over us once we get into that kind of A zone, that 22-meter line. There's like 13 to 11 players within like 20 meters. Like it's very, very narrow. That kind of north-south attack only works if someone like a Skelton or someone like a Rob Valentini or Talented Tuba gets over the gain line once, because then you're forced to retreat, and it's very hard to be able to reset after that. Not sure we're going to get that kind of dominance. So where do the Wallabies go? And so the Wallabies have to start looking at someone like a Ben Donaldson, who I do think will start at 10, because you're not putting Taine Edmund at Ellis Park at 10 for his first start ever. That just feels extremely unfair. And then I don't see Joe Schmidt promoting James O'Connor into the starting jersey in lieu of Ben Donaldson, who's been there throughout the whole time. So you need someone like Ben Donaldson to actually say to someone like a Len Ikitau and a Joseph-Aukuso Suaalii and a Tom Wright, I need you guys ready to swing, and I need you to swing hard. And like, we might not be able to run over these players, but we have to back that all you three players are at least almost as quick as your opposite number. So it's, if you're going to be that narrow, Ben Donaldson at 10 is going to be extremely important, because I don't think that we win that north-south battle without Tupou and Valentini. It's just out of the question. So I don't think Tom Hooper is going to be running over your second rowers. I don't think that Tom Robinson's going to be running through your front row. And I can't see Harry Wilson denting the line to be able to give us go forward ball. So we're going to have to hold and maintain and survive in the forwards, but we are going to have to win this through the back line. And that puts a shitload of pressure on our 9 and 10. And I think that brings us to who we will see at 9. I think that this is Tate McDermott's opportunity to start, because I can't see Joe Schmidt thinking it's a good idea to start Nick White in Ellis Park.
Yeah, Nick White's going to be welcomed with open arms and open hearts. No,
I'd be scared if I was the bloke. Honestly, it's not like, genuinely, like, the guy, like, he's a character, but it's terrifying, man.
I mean, to me, when I look at the 17 games of Joe Schmidt, and I sent you some stuff along earlier today about sort of how it works. There's only been a couple of games that I think have been proper defensive performances where if I was defensive coach, I would grade the Wallabies at an A. There's been 10, 11 good attacking games. It's just that the defense has left the attack too much to do in so much of the game. So you had to score 30 points to win. I mean, that's ridiculous. No team wants to have to go out thinking, I have to score 30 points today to win. So I think Tate at defense, as a defensive rapper, as a rover, as someone who sweeps in the language of sevens, it makes sense. He's quick enough. He's got sort of almost wing speed. And that helps because the Bok Nines are going to be that quick. Grant Williams, if he comes off the second, is like one of the quickest guys in rugby. So everything is going to need sweep, scramble. If the Wallabies, the plot of victory, if they could just make the Springboks malfunction and waste times in the red zone, minutes, you get about 16, 17, 18 minutes of attack in a rugby match. And, sometimes the other side gets 20, but usually it's about the same. If you can make the Springboks waste 7 minutes out of 18 in futile raids and mauls that get turned over by Will Skelton and hang, and it's 18, 17, 16 points. But I worry about the mentality of almost going, we've got to address the attack. It's almost like you got a Michelin star, you're trying to get a Michelin star, and the reviews say that your appetizers and your desserts are wonderful. Ambiance is great, but your main entrees are terrible. Your main steak is terrible. And then everyone keeps working on the dessert and the bread and the ambiance. Like, you've got to fix the steak. So it's defense. You cannot be number 5, number 4, number 3, or turn over the world champs in the backyard if you let the Springboks score 4 tries. Not everything's going to go like Twickenham, The Boks are not going to let the Wallabies score 4 tries. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So you outlined in that correspondence that you and I had the winning margins and kind of like how many points they were getting scored against. And so I kind of looked at it a different way, and I wrote an article, I think about a year ago now, where I looked at what the point differential is when we win. And apart from the Wales and Georgia games and the England game, the Wallabies can't concede more than 21 points. That's our losing barometer, because no matter how many points we score above that, as soon as it starts getting over that point, it starts becoming the losing point. And so it's quite interesting to be able to then look at, okay, so what can the Wallabies do? Because they have this drift defense that everyone calls passive, that everyone, they let the opposition get to about the 15-meter channel after a line out on the right side. They let them get out to the 15-meter channel on the left side. And then they're like, okay, well, then you've just conceded 10 meters. But what people don't see afterwards is that the Wallabies know that this is going to happen. And then they actually ice out and they rush that first phase back. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Brown has seen this and Rassie Erasmus and say, okay, well, in that case, we're just going to send whoever's at outside center or on the wing on that side, just send them straight down the tram tracks, down the 5 meter line, down the 15-meter channel, and have another phase down the blind side. Because every single time the Lions thought they got an advantage by going out, they got pushed back 5 meters. They got pushed back 10 meters. And so the Wallabies have that rush element in their defense. And it was very, very clear in game 3 in particular. But there's no chance and what I credited that to success for the Wallabies was also the wet conditions. That makes ball handling a second slower. It makes everything a lot harder. That's not going to be the case necessarily at altitude this weekend coming up. So the Wallabies have to be better on that rush because they actually do tackle quite well. They tackled at 92% in that game, rain and conditions permitting. That's the truth of it. We can't sugarcoat that. But you can see what happens when you start tackling at that 92% mark. That is where they need to be. That's what a connected line speed defense needs to be at, the percentage for it to be successful. So I 100% agree. Stake needs to be better. Ergo, defense needs to be better. Then I want to ask you maybe perhaps a harder question. What happens in Springbok land if they do drop a game against the Wallabies? What is the discourse then? What is the conversation?
If it's 1-1, it's hell. Even if it's a close 2-0, it's commotion, and there's all kinds of hand wringing about certain players. If it's a hiding at Ellis Park and then experimental Cape Town, it's close. That's okay, 2-0. If it's a crushing 2-0, then people are happy. The only way everyone's actually happy is if it's a absolute just monster, and then we get to say to the Lions, you're no good. But for sure, a loss is absolute pandemonium, and there'll be great catharsis and acrimony and a circular firing squad. But it's Wallabies have a knack of showing the Springboks what it is they're missing, because usually the Wallabies kind of know everything we just said. They're not stupid. They know it. So they try to find an asymmetrical way to play the game that it doesn't look like they should be even on the park, but they can make it close. So that's probably what we're looking at. Joe Schmidt's very, very smart at a one game thing. The question you've raised, and I think it's fair, is maybe that's Cape Town. So maybe no one's going to give up on Ellis Park, but there is a way that I think this plays out where Ellis Park is more the information reconnaissance gathering game, and then then you go down to Cape Town.
So heading into prediction territory around the result, around what we're looking at to get out of the game, and then what selections we're going to be looking at. I'm going to rattle off a quick, off the top of my head, little 23 for the Wallabies, what I think they should go with. Not what I think Schmidt will go with, because we have no idea what the status is a lot of people, but this is what the information that I have and what I think we should play. Feel free to comment when you feel that something scratches an itch for you. I think it should be Slipper, Pollard, Nongo, and then I think it should be Skelton, Frost, and I think it should be Hooper, Fraser McWright, and Harry Wilson rounding out the pack. Tate McDermott, Ben Donaldson, Len Ikitau, Joseph-Aukuso, Suaalii, and the back three, Dylan Peach, Max Jorgensen, and Tom Wright. And then off the bench, you want to have Brandon Paenga-Amosa, get big minutes into him, so split that very evenly with Billy Pollard starting. You're going to have Angus Bell coming off for his carrying ability, off the bench for his carrying ability. Then you have a Tom Robertson come off the bench as he has been doing. And then you also put a Lukan Salakaya Loto and a Nick Champion de Crepney, two tall, robust players who haven't played a lot of rugby. Get those guys in there to be able to put in as much effort as they can and to really go at the Springboks in that second half. And then that's a 6-2 split bench. So I think that's where I'm up to, yeah. And then you have I would like to see Ryan Lonergan there. I think that Nick White is not, I don't know if you want to chuck him into this contest at Ellis Park. Maybe game 2, but Then Ryan Lonergan, and then also you put in the 23 jersey, Andrew Kellaway. I think he's just such a good cover. He's a good experienced head, and that's kind of who you need. He hasn't been playing really big minutes. How does that side sound, look, feel for you?
Yeah, it makes sense. Obviously you know more than me, but on 12, 13, I might go Paisami, Iketal. Iketal is your best 13 and one of the better players in his position vis-a-vis the world in Australia. So I want to put him
Mm,
where he's best.
yeah.
And Paisami would just offer that early punch. I'd actually have Suaalii as my 23. I
Yep.
would also go 6'2" like you did. And I would
Mm,
just have Joseph be my everything guy. He's just, you're going to fill in everywhere. I might have Nick White off the bench because of his long range kicking. He's a
mm,
phenomenal kicker from 60,
mm,
58, 57, which is possible in Ellis Park. And save Lonergan for Cape Town. I like Lonergan actually. I would probably have started him or haven't had him in a long time ago. But
yeah.
I don't know if it's great to drop him into Ellis Park.
Yeah.
And then who else? Oh, Lucan's. Lucan's my bench guy. I actually might stick with Jeremy Williams just to have locks,
Mm,
because I think it's good to have four locks when you're playing
mm,
Ellis Park and just never be in the position the Lions were with Maro Itoje out and James Ryan out and Ollie
mm,
Chessum having to call lineouts
mm,
against Nick Frost and Jeff Parling, and it
mm,
was a nightmare. I think that's in today's Test rugby, you cannot have a wobbly lineout.
mm,
Besides it, everything else sounded normal and good, and
mm.
and I think that's the best way. And I think maybe just supercharging them. I mean, just saying basically this is a red hot go, it's a free
Mm,
swing, you know, play with the
yeah.
bend and
Yeah. And I think my mentality behind that is that you want big minutes into the bench guys. Like you do not want to be playing 60 minutes Will Skelton. Like it's not worth it if this is the mentality that you're going into this game. You get 45 to 50 minutes out of him and then you sub on Luke Salakaia-Loto and let him take out his frustration of not having get played his fourth game against the Lions out on the South Africans. I think I missed a player there I think I missed jersey 21. So I think it's a toss up between Gleeson and Tizano. And I think just based on what you've said, with your experience, with your knowledge of the Springboks, I think I probably lean into Tizano as a disruptor, and then we'll see how that goes. That also shifts the discourse a little bit about how that back row would look if I had Nick Champion, De Crepney, but then you could put Tom Hooper into the second row and take both second rows off and put Nick Champion, De Crepney um, at 6 or 8, depending on where you want to keep Fraser. So, yeah, and then I guess we'll continue this prediction kind of arc. And what do you foresee? Oh, it's very hard to say without the teams. It's very hard to say without what we know about the teams. But what is your gut telling you about the prediction for this game?
in Ellis Park, I think the Wallabies defense will struggle against the Springboks. It's going to be a little more lethal than they saw against the Lions. And also the 80-ness of the Springboks is going to be even better. I think the Wallabies will struggle to score tries, but they can keep, knocking penalties over. I will say I think the Wallabies will score one try.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Springboks will score about three,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But also both sides will kick penalties.
Mm.
So maybe sort of a 28 to 12-ish kind of scoreline.
Yep. I'm going to say that it's a little bit closer to the 35 mark for the Springboks. I think that there's just too much game tape on Suaalii at the moment. And we've seen Max Jorgensen struggle with a bit of defense. And it's not that he's a poor defender, it's just he's played powerful wingers. And like you said, he's not going to be the quickest one on the park. So that's going to be something that's new for him because the Lions had no speedsters that worried Max Jorgensen. He could have run down those guys whenever he wanted to. I think Dylan Peach, extremely impressive. He just doesn't have that top end speed. And so if you're going to jam someone like a Kurtley Aronson or Colby, I mean, like not the Peach is particularly tall himself, but that's a hard job if you're going to jam, if you're going to try to catch smoke. So I think that you guys have in the forwards, I think our defense is quite good. So it's more set piece that I'm worried about. The mauls and etc. You've got such extremely powerful athletes that close to the line. If you get them all within 5, I think it's almost try time, like as we saw against the British and Irish Lions. So I think it's a bit more to a 35 to, yeah, 12 is probably a decent score for us. I can see us scoring in the back line more so than in the pack. So I think that's where it's going to come, because Dylan Peach is quite a powerful athlete. Suaalii is quite a powerful athlete. And I think Jorgensen has that X factor, which truly is remarkable. So you want to get guys like that in space. But Harry, I just want to thank you so much for coming onto the channel again, talking all things rugby, but specifically South African rugby, and sharing your knowledge about the beautiful country, the beautiful republic over there. And you're going to be actually over there, right?
Yes, yeah, I'll be at both, so it'll be fun. Hopefully, I get to run into some guys like Tane Edmund that I've been, really pushing for years.
Yeah, number
Looking
one
forward to it.
fan for Tane,
Yeah.
the man from North Harbour. Not actually, but no, Harry, thank you so much. Guys, you can follow all of Harry's content on the Lekker Pod. You can follow on the 8-9 combo, as well as your X handle on X. Please, just so you say it so you get it right, so I don't get it wrong.
Oh, just at Harry Baldy Jones. So
At Harry
there you
Baldy
go.
Jones. Follow him on X. He is a well-traveled man. He has some hot takes, some artistic pieces as well on there. And if you're a big fan of World Rugby, he's got a little bit of sprinkling of everything for you. So Harry Jones, thank you very much for coming on to the Off the Ruck podcast. Greatly appreciated, mate.
Cheers, man. Loved it. You did great work.
Thank you. And everyone out there, enjoy your rugby. And I'll see you later in the week for a team announcement review. Ciao.